All right, morning, y'all. Morning. How we feeling? Good. Okay, so here's how I'm gonna start. I have done plenty of these. I know it's early. I know some of you will be fighting sleep. Some of you already are. I watched someone literally take a seat over there yesterday, eyes closed, 3 minutes in, accepted defeat, and just lay there the rest of the time. So here's my goal. I understand it because I was the same way. Last year was my first time as a leader being here, and I was sitting in one and fighting it. So here's my goal. One of them specifically is that we can have a good time and try to stay awake today and just have some fun while we're doing it. Especially if you look at this, I'm not sure whether you looked at this and said this is something I want to dive into, or if you were walking past and just wanted a power track to go into. But what you'll notice is we're talking about who am I, our identity in Christ, which is very similar to what the whole theme of this conference is. So what we're going to do is this is almost like, in a way, just going to be a little bit of an add-on and just a goal for you to kind of think about as you're leading into the rest of the session for the week. So we're going to dive right into it. But first, I thought it was only fair if I'm going to yell at you for like 45 minutes that you know a little bit about who I am. So I think a good place to start is with my wife. Her name is Jackie. Everyone say, "Aww." I know, she's great. It's like you know how Mark was like, us like pastors and student leaders and stuff, we marry out of our league. I definitely did. And I know that because every time one of my students finds out this is my wife, they go, "Really? Her? She's married to you?" And it's almost incredibly offensive every single time. Every single time, that's the reaction. And so that's my wife. And then a second very important person you need to know is my dog. Hold on. We're going to do that again because I saw a way better reaction from my dog than my wife. And if she finds out about that, it's not going to be okay. So here, let's try it again. This is my wife. And this is my dog. That was still louder, but that's fine. His name's Drew. I love him. Anyone Guardians of the Galaxy fans at all? That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, great movie. So we named him after that. I actually was surprised that she let us, but she did. And so these are some of the people in my life that I love and care a lot about. But I think to go a little bit further back, this is actually really cool for me. So I started at Momentum going into my sophomore year of high school as far away from Jesus as you possibly could be. It was one of those things where I came, I didn't want to be here at all. I don't know if any of you felt that when you walked in. And I was kind of counting down the days until I got to go home. And I'm sitting there, I didn't want to be there. I got dragged in by a friend, and that was about the only reason I was there. So I'm sitting there, and I slowly throughout the week, I start to become more and more okay with what's going on and just understanding that this is something I should probably look into. It took years, but obviously I ended up accepting Jesus. I've been chasing after him ever since. But I started going, went all throughout. Last year I started I was doing just our middle school ministry, took over our high school ministry as well, and now I've been doing both of those for going into my 5th year now. And so it's really cool for me to be able to stand in here and kind of come from these seats and be able to be on the other side of it. So again, I know what it's like in here, but I need some participation. I'm going to hook you up if you hook me up because I hear my voice enough. And so I want to hear some of you guys. So I'm going to get into it. To start off, though, I think there's only one appropriate way to do that. So we're going to be talking about identity. So this is going to be the first thing in your notes. What identity is, the definition we're going to work off of, is the collective aspect of a set of characteristics by which a thing is definitively recognizable or known. So the two words, characteristics, known, basically what it's saying is you know something or someone based off of its characteristics and the things that you would almost describe it as. And so I thought it was only fitting that we look at a historic example of this that I really enjoy. So how many of you in here like The Office? Anyone? Oh, I hear my people. So this is a great example. I want you to just be thinking about identity in this and what you're kind of seeing and how this character in here is able to kind of recognize what's happening in this situation. You guys can come on in. There's not a lot of seats, but you can kind of sit on the floor if you want. We're about to watch some TV together, so feel free to hop on in. Classic. Okay. So I didn't just do that because I like The Office, even though I do. But I think what we get to kind of see from that is something that we look at and we go, that's obviously ridiculous. But what you kind of see is the character Dwight really easily picks up on what Jim's doing. He sees the things that he knows are true about him, the facts, the like way he dresses, the glasses, all that, and instantly realize what he's doing, which is imitating him. And so I was thinking about like, what does that look like in me? Because if what we're gonna really do is focus on ourselves and what we do with our identity and how to try to live from it. But I think it's only fair to share with you how I struggle with it, so you can go, oh, that's not so bad. If I'm only like this, at least I'm not like that guy. So that's my goal right now. So I was thinking about it, like as a kid, I was, and still kind of now, I really like superheroes. Anyone in here like all about superheroes when you were a kid? Maybe you like now, whatever it was. So I was all about them. And one of my favorite superhero movies at the time was Fantastic Four. And this is kind of a little bit of an older movie. They haven't really made a new one in a while. But there was a character in there called the Flame, and that was my favorite character, or the Human Torch. And it's kind of self-explanatory. He would literally turn into a Human Torch, right? And there was this time where I started to feel pretty warm, and I was like, that's kind of weird. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, so I started feeling pretty warm. And normally, when you start to feel a little funky, you go and tell who? Your parents, right? I didn't. Because it got a little bit worse. I went and took my temperature. It was like 103. And so I'm starting to feel like terrible. But I am starting to think of the number one rule of being a superhero, which is what? Well, I heard someone over here say it. Not that. You can't tell anyone your identity. And so what I thought was happening was I thought I was turning into the Human Torch because of my fever. And so I did everything to hide it from my parents. And what ended up happening was I got so sick and was trying so hard to hide this that I started breaking out in hives. So we're at the point where my parents could see what was happening to me. And they instantly, they had to take me to the hospital because we had waited so long. I ended up obviously being fine. But you could tell from here, I thought the things that were happening to me were me becoming a superhero. Obviously, if that was happening now, you can go, Dillon, that's a little bit weird. It was weird then, and it would be weird now. But I grew up from that. Obviously, realized the whole superhero thing wasn't a thing for me. I gave up on that. Want to let someone else give it a try. And then moving in, I kind of moved into this time of just really trying to find acceptance in a lot of people. So I go into middle school, and what was kind of sucky for me was I had to jump from school to school, not because my parents were moving or anything, but because they kept redistricting the zone of school I was in. And so what this did was this made it to where I would have to go from one school with one set of friends, and then middle school to another set of friends, and then junior high a different set. And so this led to me trying to always try to make new friends in these different situations. So I'm in middle school, 5th grade, and I'm walking with this guy that I think's cool or whatever, and I'm trying to kind of hang out with him. We're going outside. It's one of those kind of field days. I think the military's there, and so they have a bunch of different things set up. And one of the things they had set up out there was this massive helicopter. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, oh, do you see that helicopter? And he's like, that's from the game Halo. And I'm like, oh, yeah, for sure. And he goes, you play Halo? And I was like, when am I not playing Halo? I'd never seen a game or touched it in my entire life. But I'm trying to get in cool with this guy. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, the only time I'm not playing is right now because I'm always playing Halo, doing the things and everything. And he's kind of looking at me funny. And so he goes, oh, yeah, that's called the Whirlybird 3000. I was like, yeah, I'm always in that thing, shooting the guns and stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, just dead in the face and goes, yeah, that's not a thing. That's not the game at all. And walked away from me, and I don't think we ever had a conversation after that. And we were in the same class for 2 years. Because here's what he knew and what we all know. When someone is being unauthentic and not being who they are, it is so evident. You talk to a little kid and they're lying about something, or you see someone, or I've seen it to where I've been in one of these where a guy will come up and be like, yeah, right, and crush a Red Bull on his head, and you're like, what is going on right now? Because that's not what people really are. And when you see someone being unauthentic, you can instantly realize. And this is what kind of happened to me through my middle school years. And then I moved into this time where I had a lot of rough stuff going on with my family. My parents got divorced, and then through a series of kind of really unfortunate events, my mom ended up passing away. And so in that time, everyone basically was kind of figuring out about this, hearing about this, and I became the kid that had lost his mom, and people were making up rumors about it and talking about it. And it was one of those things where like I would kind of see the pointing going at, and I was like, are they talking about me because of this? What are they talking about? And it was just the identity that I started to take on was like people just felt bad for me. And I didn't want that. I didn't want people to feel bad for me. And so what I did was I tried to take on this identity of feeling strong and like I would want the thing that I loved is when people were like, he's handling it so well. He's so strong. My dad would be like, oh yeah, he's doing great. Like he doesn't need it, whatever. And I went through those years of constantly trying to like hide myself. And then moving on, I ended up accepting Jesus, moved past that and everything, because God's awesome. And I get to this place where now I'm trying to almost be like the perfect Christian in a sense. I like I said, I came into momentum as far away from Jesus as you possibly could. And I go in and I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can to be right. I'm only going to listen to Christian music. I'm only going to like watch sermons. I'm never watching TV again. Like all this stuff. And if you've ever tried that, you know it is impossible to keep up with. You burn yourself out. And so I just couldn't do it. I would see other people. I'm like, I don't know how they do it. And then, of course, find out that that's not what, like, your pastor isn't just only watching sermons 24/7. Like, we have lives and stuff. And so I went through that. And I share all that with you because I want you to understand, like, we're all chasing this thing called identity. I'm just throwing that definition back up there for you. Again, like, we're chasing what our identity is. And so I don't know what you walked in this room trying to figure out right now. I know I had some people ask questions yesterday, and I know like you can walk in and you're like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Like, where am I supposed to go after I graduate? What am I supposed to be in high school? Whatever it is, and you can feel like you're just chasing after that. And so I really want you guys to understand that, like, I think one of the guys who spoke, he said, God doesn't really usually just talk to people in that way and be like, you're going to be a dentist. Like, he doesn't do that most of the time. And so we're not going to figure out, like, what is your specific identity that God has handcrafted for you, because the truth is he could have something specific for you. But ultimately, it could just be if you're doing God's work and you're fulfilling the Great Commission, you're going out, you're making disciples, you're teaching them, and you're baptizing, or whatever it is, like, maybe that's all it is, and you can do it in whatever field you're in. And so I want to kind of start there and work our way through what exactly this looks like for the rest of the time. And so as we're getting into it, I want a question for you guys. This is where you answer and stuff. So if you are introducing yourself for the first time to someone, what are some common things you are going to either ask or tell someone about yourself? Anyone, raise your hand. Yes. Where you're from. You're so smart. You're smart. What else? Yeah, back there. Your name. I got a great arm. Catch that. Dime. What else? Yes. Hobbies. Yeah. What else? What sports you play? Yes. What about your parents? What do your parents always ask like another adult when they first meet them? What's your profession? What do you do for work, sir? Like, that's like all they ask. I was on a vacation with my dad, and like every single person he bumped into, like he would go, what do you do for work? That's like what they always ask. Last one, anyone? Going once, twice, so okay. So these are the things that like we look at, and what can happen a lot is what we do is we take the things that we do and we let them become who we are. Hear me. You let the things that you do become who you are in a sense. And what happened with me is I was putting all myself into these things. Another thing that I was really into was sports. I played sports all the way growing up, all the way until my sophomore year of high school. I thought whatever it was, I was going to go play lacrosse or football or whatever it was in college. And what ended up happening is I got hurt again and again and again, and then I got a surgery, and it just continuously kept taking me out and out. And finally, I just had to go. I would like to walk maybe and be able to do other cool things when I'm like at least 18, so I stopped playing sports. And what happened for me was I just slowly was like, well, what the heck do I do with my life now? That was like all I did year-round was go from one sport to the next. And here's a crazy stat for you guys. This kind of moves into a little bit of what I'm getting at. So when you look at like professional athletes specifically, how many of you are going to play sports? Raise your hand. Okay. So think about sports. The goal when you're playing sports, if you're trying to make it as a professional, right? How many of those people, give me a percentage-wise, how many of them do you think go broke on like the percentage? Anyone guess when they retire? You know what? Just give it a guess. I just need some percentages. Yeah, back there. 70. I don't know what the number was. Wow, that was a good throw. What else? 0%? I like to guess. I'll give it to you. Oh, sorry. That was a bad throw. What else? Other guesses? I need one more. 90%. Now you're making me look bad. I always do that with my wife. I'll like tell her to like take a guess on something, and she'll guess way higher than the thing I'm like trying to get her to do. I'm like, well, now it's not that impressive on what it is. But the number is 78% of professional athletes go broke. And when I mean broke, I mean broke. Like in debt, file for bankruptcy, all the fun stuff that goes with it. I forgot to give that to you. I'm not going to toss it. And they end up going broke. And so if the goal of being an athlete is to eventually become a professional athlete, and then only 22% of them don't go broke at the end, it's like, what are we all chasing? And so what I really need you guys to understand as we walk through the rest of this, we're going to look at a person from the Bible that I think we can learn a lot from with this, but I want you to think about what's the thing that you do the most right now. Are you someone who spends all your time on sports, band, school, work, friends? You're like, I don't spend on any time on that. I like to just be alone. Like, what is the thing that you spend all your time doing? And what I want you to be processing today is that thing that you spend most of your time doing, thinking about, whatever it is that something you do, or is that almost who you are? And what you can think about is if that's taken from you, what would your life look like right now? We had some guys talk about like things that happened in their life and how, of course, like I believe it was Mark's, like his dad getting severely injured, that shook him as it would anyone. But what he realized is he didn't just love his dad, but he put his identity and his family in that. And so it's almost a good way to look at it. But what I want to do for the rest of the time is I want to look at a biblical character on what we can do to look from that. But I think the best thing we can do is I almost find myself every time I'm looking at the Bible, I almost always reference Genesis because I think it's a great place to start. And I think God did too because he started the book with it, right? And so there's a really great verse in Genesis that we can look at when it comes to our identity. And so the verse that I want to throw up to you guys is Genesis 1:27. It says, so God created mankind in his own image, and the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. What did our speaker the other day tell us about things being repeated multiple times? Yeah. Yeah. So this wasn't like the double, like the tall. This is like the tall guy. This is like NBA guy. Heads up, Smarty, coming your way. This is like the tall guy. And so if we're looking at one of the first verses in the entire Bible, and he took the time to tell us it 3 times, it's probably pretty dang important. So I really want you to focus on this. The main thing I want you to focus on is this word image. So when we take a picture of something, we are looking at an image. We are not looking at the actual thing. We're looking at almost like this replication of the moment that's been captured. And so when it says that God has created mankind in his own image, what it's saying is that we have the ability to reflect his image. It doesn't mean we're always going to do it. I think a good example of this is if you look at the moon. The moon isn't something in itself that provides light. Instead, what it does is it reflects the sun. And so when we look at this happening, we have to understand that we're not always going to reflect God. What we have the option to do with our identity is we have the opportunity to reflect God. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a character that we can learn from and how he either did a good job doing that or not so much. But the thing that I want you to take from that as we get ready to head into this is our identity. So our identity comes from who created, not what has been created. So next fill in the blank, our identity comes from who created, not what has been created. And what I mean by this is if God created us, he clearly knew the best way to design us, right? He knew the best way to design us. And so if we're looking at how we want to respond and act and live our life, we want to go from who created us, not what has been created. And what has been created is your sports, your school, your family, all the things around you. That's what's been created. So we want to operate from this truth, not from the truth of the things that we like to do or the things we find us doing on a most common basis. So first thing that I want to read for you, actually I want to hear some guesses. So if we're talking about someone in the Bible New Testament guy who is kind of known for being a little bit brash and like kind of crazy and just kind of does what he wants. Who do you think that we're talking about? Let's go, man. You know, you're so smart, you get two. Look at that. Share with a friend or don't. When we look at this, Peter is a great example of someone we can learn who acted from the identity that he was before Christ, and then we can see later on really growing from that and growing into someone who really operated from his identity in Christ. And so I'm just going to read for you a quick what we hear and the first thing that we see with Peter. But before that, like I want to give you guys a little bit of a background. If you don't know who Peter is, I'm going to give a real quick one. He was basically he was a Jewish guy, and what that meant at this time was he wasn't someone who was like a practicing religious leader of any sort. And so back then, if you were Jewish, and you would basically like a big goal back then was that you would be a religious leader. You would go through and you would be studied and all these things. And so Peter was a fisherman, which meant that either we don't know exactly what happened, but that he would have flunked out maybe, or couldn't even like do it, or his parents couldn't provide in that sense. And so we have just a fisherman. That is Peter. And we know some things about him, that he's just a common guy, everyday normal person, but we also hear that he's a little bit crazy. And so this is his first interaction with Jesus. So it says, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the first who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, we have found the Messiah, this is the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas, which was translated to Peter. The Bible always does that fun thing with a couple people where they have like 6 different names, and you're like, well, which one is it? So we're going off Peter today, and that translation is Cephas. And do you guys have any idea what the like original word in that language meant? Come on, you guys know this. Yeah. Let's go. Front row, man. Come on. So we had, he called him the Rock, and that was basically this name that he gave him right away. And so the question that I have is like, what was the first thing Jesus did when he met Peter? The first thing, instantly. He did what? We just talked about it. He gave him a new name, right? Like instantly. He goes, hey, you have a new name. And what he was doing in this moment was this. He was giving him this new name, and what we need to understand is it's the same thing for us, is that when we meet Jesus, he changes our identity. When we meet Jesus, he changes our identity. So what I'm going to do now that we are kind of following along, I like to think of when I'm like doing this as almost like a little roadmap. You heard about me and like the things that I do, and I hope you can put yourself in a place where you understand where you're putting your identity in the things you're doing most. And then we understand that God created us in his image to reflect his image. And we now see that when we meet Jesus, he changes our identity. Now you're probably thinking, now what the heck does that mean? That's why I came here to understand who am I, what my identity in Christ is. Relax, I'm about to do it. Okay, so what we see kind of happen from here is I want to walk through 3 stories of Peter in times where he just did his own thing. He just kind of went off on his own, or he just went a little crazy in a certain situation. Can anyone think of some like classic Peter stories that we might talk about? Yeah. He did. That was kind of wise. I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, out of all body parts to slice off of someone, you went for the ear? I don't know. Preference, yeah.
After Jesus was crucified, he denied him.
He absolutely did. Oh, that was a terrible throw. I got fouled. What else? Other stories? Anyone? You guys remember when he did the thing where he walked on water? That was pretty crazy. I'm going to give myself a smarty for that. So what we got to look at is these 3 stories. So we are going to start with walking on water. I was kind of hoping someone would say that so I can move into it, but it's okay. So walking on water. What we're going to learn from this story about Peter, I'll get into it, but I just want to read some scripture because that's kind of important. So we look at Matthew 4, 28 through 14, 28 through 33, and this is basically the story we see of Peter walking on water. It says, Lord, if it is you. So he's seeing Jesus kind of standing on the water, and he's like, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Fair. And so can I get Peter to come up here, also named Isaac Parent, please? So Peter, also Isaac, is standing on the water. Do that stand. Yeah. So he walks on, gets in the water, steps on it. And he's got great balance. So he's walking on there. And I want you to look at, can you be Jesus for us? Say hi. Thank you. So that's Jesus back there. So you're focused on Jesus right now. It's pretty easy. You're like, okay, I'm standing on the water. Everything's going fine. But then I got some bad news. What it says here is that then Peter got down on the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. So focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. Stand still. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. And so the waves came and the wind and everything started to get a little crazy. And I want you to think about this right now as like almost when you think about your life. Think about how easy it is right now to be focused on Jesus. You guys are literally around a bunch of Christians hearing about God all day. It's so easy. You're sitting here right now going, I'm going to do all these awesome things when I get back. I'm going to start a Bible study. I'm going to pray for people. I'm going to read my Bible. And you're focused on Jesus. So you're focused on Jesus and everything's fine. But then you get home and these waves start to happen. And everything happens. Maybe you get back into sports and you're like, I'm going to have a great year. I'm going to get college visits. Everything's going to be awesome. Boom, Andrew, you're out for the year. What are you going to do with your senior year? It gets hard again. And then when we look at this, is these things keep happening. You lose your job maybe, or your parents lose their job. You think you're going to study for this test, and then you get ready to take your ACT, and you fail it. Win. And then what happens is we then can get a bunch of things that happen in our life. Those are yours. Go ahead, feel free. We get things that go on in our life, and we have a lot of things that are hard to juggle, and we have things flying at us left and right, and we just don't know what to do with it. And they're coming and they're going, and then they're getting hit, and then they fall. And what we see happen, you can throw the rest out if you want. What happened was he began to sink. Because what are you doing? Not right now. You're not focused on Jesus. Have a seat. Thank you. Give him a round of applause. Good on, Sydney. I've seen you throw and hit things way harder, and I gave you permission to throw, so I'm a little disappointed in you, but that's okay. So when we look at this, as silly as it is, really, but when we think about this, it's so true. It goes, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. So what the heck does this mean for us? You know, we look at this and we're like, well, I'm probably not going to be walking on water anytime soon. But what I do know is, like I was saying, you guys are going to go home and things are going to get a lot harder. Maybe you're even here right now and something already hard is going on at home and you were just waiting to get back to go right back into it. Maybe it's a sin that you're just stuck in and you know you're focused on Jesus right now and it's so easy not to do it. But as soon as you get home and you look away from him, it's going to be really easy to walk away from that. And so that's the first thing that we can do when we start to get distracted from our identity. And then a friend over here said our next thing that we see is that we tend to just cut it off. So taking things into our own hands. What I mean by this is the story of when, like we said, Peter cut off the guard's ear. So again, in this set of verses, we see this happen. So it says in John 18:10-11, it says, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest. I don't have a sword, so don't worry, I'm not going to bring any more volunteers up. But it says the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? What I want you to see here is I want you to notice is that this isn't the first time Jesus has said something along these lines. He has been telling his disciples all the time that he is going to die, that he has to die this death. And over again, they're like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. And so even now in this moment, the people are coming to kill him. And Peter's like, not on my watch. And it was really good intentions in this moment, right? So he's like, I'm going to help out Jesus. I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to save him. And he goes and he like cuts this dude's ear off. And he's probably thinking, oh yeah, Jesus is going to be so proud of me right now. And Jesus is like, what the heck are you doing? I told you what I'm going to do. I told you I need to drink the cup that my Father has given me. And we know Jesus doesn't want to do this, but we know that this is what he has to do. And what we see in Peter is the same thing that we do our own. Like I said on here, what we're doing in this moment is the same as Peter is. We're trying to take things into our own hands. It's the same way that when we know what's best for us, and we know what God wants for us, and we know you're like, whatever, I'm just going to do it and I'm going to take it. I know for me, I knew I was called to be in ministry in my hometown. But I did not know exactly how I was going to have money. So what I did was I thought I was going to join the military, and I was like, "They'll take care of my college. It's going to be sick. I won't have to worry about anything. I'll go be a chaplain in the Navy. Everything will be great." I go and I'm like applied and everything. I'm literally seconds away from getting signed in. And what happens is the surgery that I had to make sure I could keep like walking and all that stuff. They ended up disqualifying me from joining the Navy because of that. God was like, "Dude, what are you doing? Stop trying to take it into your own hands. I'll cover you." And he did. And it took me stepping back, and I literally walked out of there, and I'm literally saying to myself, "You idiot. God told you what he was going to do with you, and you still try to take it into your own hands." And I don't know what that is for you guys, but I can guarantee you at some point, you're like, "I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to get to college. I'm going to take care of my own money, and everything's going to be great." But what we do sometimes is when God calls us, even like whatever number you do or what from your heart, like 10% tithing and everything, you're like, "But I only have like $100 right now. Like I can't give money." But we also know that God says that those who can trust with a little, he can trust with a lot. And so we see these things battling with each other, and we just keep trying to take things into our own hands. And so the last thing that we see from Peter that we can learn from is this application of he just straight up denied Jesus, like flat out betrayal. And when we look at this story, you might be thinking, "Well, I would never deny Jesus." And newsflash, that's exactly what Peter thought. So when we look at this is what's happening going into this. We kind of go back a little bit earlier. Peter's basically at dinner, and he's telling Jesus that, like, "I'm never going to deny you. Like, I'm going to be there till the end. I'll be ride or die, whatever it is." And Jesus looks back at him and goes, "Yeah, you're going to deny me 3 times before the sun even comes up." And so we see this play out. It says, "But Peter said, 'Man, I did not know what you were talking about.'" Someone's accusing him. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. So literally before the rooster, like immediately as he's saying this, he's saying and denying Jesus that he was with him and all this, the rooster crows. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. I'm imagining this look is like the look that your parents give you or your coach does when you're about to do something dumb or you just did something dumb and they give you the look like, "Did I tell you not to do that?" Or like, "I told you you were going to do that. What was going to happen?" That's what I'm imagining in my head. It says, "And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he said to him, 'Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times.'" And he went out and wept bitterly. And again, I can almost guarantee almost every single person in this room will not be in a situation where you would probably say, if you truly believe in Jesus, that I don't believe in Jesus. There's a couple reasons why. One, you weren't going to instantly be almost put to death if you said that, so there's not much to worry about. Maybe you have some like concerns, or maybe you think a friend will think something different about you. But there's a really rare instance where some of you would probably say, "If you believe in Jesus truly, that I don't believe him." And so you're like, "How does this apply to me? How would I ever flat out betray Jesus?" And here's the bad news for all of us, is we flat out betray Jesus all the time when we sin. Every single person, because I know it, because I do it. In my head, I'm about to do something that I know is sin, and I justify it. Everyone, right? We go and we're like, "Well, maybe this isn't actually sin, or maybe it's not that bad," or like, "No, it's good. I'll do it, and then I'll repent, and it'll be good later because Jesus has forgiveness." And we catch ourselves flat out betraying Jesus, but we deny it. And so after these 3 things that we learned about what Peter did, I want you to think about this. So what's happening with this is that when we live from our own identity, when we deny Jesus through our actions. We live from our own identity when we deny Jesus through our actions. But here's the cool thing about this, and I want to kind of get to the end so we can have some time. But when we look at what Peter was doing in these instances, is he was being himself, but he was mixing being himself with trying to make things good on his own in different situations, or he was not focused on Jesus or whatever it was. And that's what we do, is we live from our own identity when we deny Jesus through our actions. And what I want us to kind of get from this and where we can go is just a little bit about Peter's redemption, is that Peter ends up, like, Jesus comes back to him, he's talking to him, and he gives him this opportunity to repent in a way where he goes like he's basically like, "Well, then the whole, like, then feed my sheep if you truly love me." And he asked him 3 times to basically get back for the 3 times that he denied him. And so we see this happen. And then from there, we see Peter actually living from the identity that Christ gave him, the identity of being the rock. And this is one of the coolest verses that that has really been sticking out to me. And it's cool because just kind of been looking into this and studying it even before this. But there's this verse in Acts 4:13 that does a great job of showing where we get to learn from Peter's new identity and what he's really living from. It says in this that when they saw the courage of Peter and John, they realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. They were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with who? Jesus. And so we see this when we look back at this definition of what identity is. So when we look back at this definition of what our identity is, remember, it's the collective aspect of the set of characteristics by which a thing is definitively recognizable or known. Peter was very easily identified as being with Jesus. But while this was true, Peter was still who he was, an ordinary, normal guy, but he was with Jesus. These two things mixed. And so the two things that I want you to take from this is, number one, embrace who God created you to be. So first and foremost, every single person in here, the best thing you can do for yourself is embrace who God created you. And this is one that you're like, Dillon, I came here so you could tell me what my identity is, not so I could go on some like soul-searching journey. Sorry to tell you, but that's kind of what you got to do. When we get to know someone, we know them by spending a lot of time around them. I remember me and my wife have been together for almost like 8 years, like dating. We got married this past March. But when I first got to know her, and when people get to know her now, even they know her and they're like, oh, she's so quiet, or like she's whatever. And that's the thing that people always say about her. Anyone else get that about themselves? If it's true about you, you probably wouldn't even raise your hand. And so that's what she would always get. And it makes her so mad because she's like, I am not. And I'll tell you, she's not. We were putt-putting, I remember, like one of our first dates, because that's, of course, where you go on one of your first dates. And so we're putt-putting, and I hit the ball, and we're playing a very serious competition. I hit the ball, it goes up the hill, and it starts rolling back. And I go to put my putter down to stop it, and I just hear out of nowhere, cheer! I was like, who just said that? And it was her. She took it so seriously, and I had never heard her get above like this, and she was up here. So it shocked me. But in that moment, I started to get to know her, and because then I knew her, I began to become more familiar and know how to like interact with her and get to know her. And obviously it worked out because we got married. But I look at this, and what I want you guys to do with yourselves is get to know yourself. And there's kind of two ways to do it. One way to do it is literally just spend time with yourself. You're like, Dylan, I spend 24/7 with myself. What do you mean by that? You don't. I'm telling you. Every single moment of most of your guys' day, and I'm telling you this because it's true for me sometimes, is consumed with people or media. 99% of the time, people got an AirPod in, and you're either listening to someone, or you're listening to music, or you're listening to a podcast, or a YouTube video, or whatever it is, and you're not getting time to actually hear what you're doing yourself. So maybe this literally is just, you know what, I'm going to walk outside 15 minutes, leave the phone. And I promise you I'm not being the old guy that says phones are bad, because I think phones are really great. But there's times where you just need to listen to yourself and find out things about you. And then the second way that's good to do that is for you to straight up go and ask someone about, like, what do they think about you? And so they're able to look at you and go, what are the things that are most distinguishable about you? That's a really good place to start. There's literally 3 people that I trust super well, and I will literally just text them and ask them to tell me something about myself, whether it's something good, something bad, and that's super helpful for me because then I know where to grow from it back. So second thing and last thing, and then we'll be done. If the first thing we need to do is embrace God who created you to be, the second thing you need to do is remind yourself what God says about you. So embrace who God created you to be, just like Peter, ordinary, unschooled fisherman. And then the second part of that says that we need to remind yourself what God says about you, what he was able to do because of who he was and who he was with Jesus. Who he was and who he was with Jesus. And so we see this happen with him. And so what we need to do, and this is the most classic thing I can tell you guys at a Christian conference, is read your dang Bible. And I'm not saying read it and it's like, yeah, I'm going to go home and I'm going to read it. And then you start and you go to like Genesis and you start trying to read through and then you just give up and it's like whatever. Don't do that. I'm telling you, the best thing you can do for your walk is get in your Bible. And again, whatever you got to do, get with someone. And I'm preaching at you, and I know you hear this all the time. But if you don't get in your Bible, how are you going to know what God says about you? Because you hear the songs or whatever it is, but like, where does that come from? You guys know that every single worship song you can find directly in the Bible based off the Scripture, because that's where it comes from. You can only know what God says about you if you're getting in the Bible. And just kind of wrapping up with this, and then I got some time for some questions. So when we look at this, I want you to kind of look back at this. One of the first things I put on here, it's your last note, but it was already on there. But our identity comes from who created, not what has been created. This is my little cheat code. I always tell my kids, if you want to like take something from something, and you're like your group leader or your youth pastor, or whoever, asks you what you learned, this is what you learned today. Okay, got it? Cool. So you get to tell them this is what you learned, and what this is so important to understand about this is the Bible tells us that if a man looks in the mirror and walks away and forgets what he looks like, he's a fool. And that's just what we got to do with the Bible is when we read it, you don't have to read 3 chapters. You have your whole life to read that book. You don't got to rush through it. You don't have a test on it. You like just take your time with it. Go chapter by chapter. You guys know we spent like an hour on one verse last night. Like you don't have to rush through it. You can look at one set of verses and think about how do I apply this and take this for my life. And so if we can do that, I think by the end of this, we can look at ourselves and we go, who am I? You're like, maybe I'm a quiet person. That's fine. Be the quiet person. But be who God created you to be. Maybe you're the person that is like Peter. You're a little brash and out there and telling people and talking or whatever. Be that. I was thinking of this really powerful character from a really good movie. Anyone seen Toy Story? No? Yes. How about, you know what I'm talking about? Forky? You know what I'm talking about? So Forky, right? Forky was a what? A sport, which is really confusing, by the way. I don't know why they didn't call him Sporky. Side note, sports is the greatest pencil. So just throw that out there. Every meal is a good sport meal. But when we look at Sporky or Forky, what he does is he was kind of turned into this toy. So his creator, like the person who made him, turns him into a toy. And that's like, the other toys are like, dude, you're a toy. Stop going in the garbage can. And he's like, that's where I'm supposed to be. I feel comfortable in there. He just keeps running back to the trash can. And this is silly, but we look at this, and I think there's actually a pretty powerful message in there, because you guys were created for something specifically, and if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like you're not where you're supposed to be, if you feel like you're unfulfilled, it's because you're doing something that God didn't create you to do. And what you got to do is straight up get like Forky and try to figure that out. Figure out the thing that God created you to be and own it. And don't be like anyone else. I lived so long doing that, and people know it. They get it right away. So if we can do that, I promise you, I didn't give you guys the secret formula on how to figure out your profession or what your job is going to be or who you're going to marry. But if we can identify like your identity and who it comes from and what has been created, I can guarantee you're going to live a lot, not easier life or not even better life sometimes, but you're going to live a life that's more fulfilled because it's who created you. That's what he wants for you. So we got a couple minutes left before I can let you guys out of here. So that way we don't have an awkward 3 minutes. Who's got any questions or thoughts on this? Could be on anything about identity. It could be a random fact. I don't care what it is. Anybody got any questions or anything? Okay. It's going to be awkward for 3 minutes then. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, who's got any questions? Come on. Anyone? Any questions on identity? What it looks like? We can talk about, I can tell you some good power tracks to go to the next couple of days. Anyone thoughts? Anything? Yes.
Kind of random question. But
Yes.
Like, out of all like the disciples, who you like relate with?
That is a great question. If you couldn't tell, I actually think I relate with Peter a lot. Because I don't think a lot before I do things, and I just kind of do it. And so that's why when I was looking at this, I was able to really identify with like Peter and just the fact that I don't think before I do things. And sometimes that's a good thing because you can get yourself into some good trouble, but then you can think and do and not do things, and you get yourself into some bad trouble. So that's me. Yeah.
How long have you known her?
We met when I was in. I actually met her in 7th grade playing cornhole. She was my opponent, and I crushed her. So I had to start things right off in the relationship, you know. But we didn't actually start dating until we were sophomores in high school. But in 7th grade, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I actually have like way too much. So does anyone else want some? Can I throw it out like literally a parade? Are you guys not gonna? Please don't get hurt. Ready?
Over here.
There you go. I got another. Don't worry. Oh, that was terrible. Heads up. All right, we got time for like 2 more questions. Anyone? You said what? Oh, good question. So this one is actually, it's like a really good reminder from this talk, really. So, this is my mom's birthday in Roman numerals. I told you guys she passed away when I was 14. And I'll give you guys the real Christian answer because I have like, they always tell you this is a really good note in general. To have a 30-second testimony on your faith, a 3-minute testimony, a 10-minute, and like a 30. Always have those because you never know when you're going to get to share your faith with someone. But this is my like quick one for Christians. So my mom passed away not knowing Jesus, and I think Mark said it last night. His dad passed away, and he knows he's in hell. And this is like it's like a truth that I live with is the fact that I know that my mom passed away not knowing Jesus. That means she's separated from God for eternity. And I live from this. This verse is John 11:25, and it says, it's the story of Lazarus. It says, Jesus said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And what it is for me is it's a reminder, and it's a conversation starter for me, that when we die, we don't know Jesus we're separated from. And the truth is, I want every single person that I know and love to not, I know I can't control it, but to at least say I did everything on this side of eternity to know that they have a chance to be with God for the rest of eternity as well. And then this one is actually, my wife thinks is really stupid, but I think it's kind of funny. It says, it's like mountains, and it says servant under it. And it comes from Philippians, where it talks about taking the nature of a servant. So, nature, servant. It's a good reminder for me, too, because I like there's like times, no joke, where I know I should be serving someone in some way. And I'll be like, oh, I kind of want to just put that off. Like, literally, one of my kids forgot to bring a towel, and I brought 2 towels because I'm a responsible adult. And he was like, does anyone have an extra towel? And I was like, and I looked at my arm and I was like, dang it, here's my towel. So, yeah. All right, it's 10:20. Feel free to add out. I'll stay up here if you guys got any questions. Thanks, guys.